She walked into the room quietly, almost unnoticed at first. Nothing about her appearance screamed genius or authority. She was just a simple woman, modestly dressed, carrying herself with calm confidence. Yet in that very moment, she was about to change the mood of the entire place. On the board, written in bold chalk, was a math problem labeled by many as impossible. Professors, students, even experienced mathematicians had tried and failed. The problem had become a kind of unsolvable riddle, one that tested not just knowledge, but patience and ego. People whispered that anyone who even dared to attempt it was bound to fail. As she stood near the board, the room fell silent. Eyes locked on her, some doubtful, some amused. Who was this woman? What made her think she could solve something the experts had declared impossible? The tension in the air was thick, and the challenge itself loomed larger than life. She didn't rush. She looked at the problem carefully, her face calm, almost serene. While others had drowned in equations and endless steps, she seemed to see something no one else did. The clock ticked. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Skeptical smirks spread across the room. But then her hand moved. Chalk touched the board, and numbers flowed with clarity, as if she had rehearsed the answer long before stepping in. 47 seconds. That's all it took. When she dropped the chalk and stepped back, the silence was different now, heavier, filled with disbelief. Some leaned forward, others froze, eyes wide in shock. Could it really be? Did she just solve the impossible problem? No one dared to speak. The reaction was coming, but none of them were ready for what happened next. The room was still buzzing with disbelief, but behind that silence lay an unspoken question. Who was she? How could someone so ordinary walk into a hall full of scholars and dismantle a puzzle that had mocked the brightest minds for years? It wasn't just a math problem, it was a statement, a boundary line between what people thought was possible and what wasn't. For months, even the most skilled professors had worked late nights, covering entire boards with equations, only to circle back to the same dead ends. The impossible problem, as it was called, had become a legend of frustration. Yet here stood a woman who didn't fit the picture of a typical mathematician. She had no fancy title, no degrees pinned on the wall, no reputation that preceded her. Many had assumed she was just an onlooker, someone who might sit quietly in the back and watch the experts argue. But her steady hands and calm eyes told a different story. She carried herself as though numbers were not enemies to wrestle with, but old friends she understood deeply. Whispers began to spread among the audience. Some said she had to be a hidden genius, perhaps a student of some forgotten master. Others believed it was a trick, a lucky guess, something that would fall apart once checked. The professors in the room exchanged uneasy glances, torn between their pride and their curiosity. She remained silent, offering no explanation, almost as if she didn't need one. That only added to the mystery. Why was she here? What drove her to attempt something everyone else had given up on? And as the stunned silence lingered, one professor finally stepped forward, his voice tight with both suspicion and awe, ready to challenge her work. The professor's footsteps echoed as he approached the board, his face caught between curiosity and doubt. He adjusted his glasses and stared hard at the numbers she had written. Every eye followed him, waiting for the verdict. He traced each step slowly, almost too slowly, as if hoping to find a hidden flaw. The woman stood quietly at the side, not defending her work, not boasting, just watching with a stillness that made the moment even more unsettling. The longer he looked, the more restless the room became. Students shifted in their seats, whispering about how this could change everything if it were true. Some wanted to believe it was real, that a simple woman could outshine those with years of study. Others resisted the idea, clinging to the thought that this had to be a mistake. The conflict wasn't just about math anymore. It was about pride, ego, and the fear of being proven wrong in front of everyone. Meanwhile, in the back row, a younger student leaned forward with wide eyes. He had spent weeks trying to crack the same problem, losing sleep and nearly giving up hope. Watching her solve it in seconds was both inspiring and crushing. He wondered what secret she carried. Was it brilliance, experience, or something entirely different? Another subplot quietly unfolded among the faculty. Some professors whispered among themselves, debating whether they should acknowledge her solution publicly or discredit her before she gained too much attention. Recognition could shift the balance of respect in their academic circle, and not everyone was ready for that change. The professor at the board finally exhaled, his chalk trembling slightly as he marked a line beneath her final answer. The silence grew sharper, heavier, as everyone leaned in. His next words would decide whether this woman had just rewritten the rules or exposed herself to humiliation. The professor's hand froze just above the board, his eyes darting back and forth between the problem and her flawless solution. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, though he tried to hide it by clearing his throat. The silence in the hall was almost unbearable now. Every person present could feel that something extraordinary was unfolding before them. The woman stood still, her face calm, as if she had expected this moment of doubt and tension. She didn't flinch, didn't even shift her weight, while the room seemed to hold its collective breath. Whispers spread again, louder this time, and the crowd began to split into two clear sides. Some muttered that this was genius at its purest form, the kind of brilliance that didn't come from years in lecture halls, but from a natural gift. Others scoffed, their voices sharp with disbelief, saying it was impossible for someone with no academic background to solve what was once considered the ultimate test of intellect. The clash of pride and wonder filled the air, feeding the storm of emotions. The younger student in the back felt his heart racing. To him, this wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about hope, the possibility that brilliance could come from anywhere, that maybe he too could find a way to break through limits others had set. Yet the more he listened to the professors whispering in anger and envy, the more he feared they would never allow her victory to stand. At the front, the professor lowered his hand slowly, turning back toward the audience. His face was pale, his jaw tight, as if torn between admitting the truth and protecting his pride. Everyone leaned forward, waiting for him to speak. The tension was so sharp it almost hummed in the air. And in that fragile moment, right before the truth was revealed, the room felt ready to explode. Just as the professor opened his mouth, ready to announce his verdict, another voice cut through the room. From the far side of the hall, a second professor rose abruptly, holding a stack of old papers. His face was stern, his tone edged with urgency. "Wait," he said, silencing the crowd instantly. "This isn't the first time this problem has appeared." The words rippled across the room like a shockwave. The audience shifted, confused. What did he mean? He explained that decades ago, in an obscure mathematical journal rarely read outside of a niche circle, a nearly identical equation had been published but was dismissed at the time as unsolvable. He held up the papers as if they were proof, claiming that this woman's solution might not be original at all. The implication was clear. If she had somehow seen that forgotten problem, her dazzling performance could be nothing more than clever imitation. The air thickened with new tension. Some students gasped, others looked at her with doubt, now replacing their admiration. The younger student in the back clenched his fists, torn between disbelief and hope. Could it really be true that she had borrowed the answer? Or was this just a desperate attempt to strip her of the credit she rightfully deserved? The woman, however, remained unmoved. Her expression didn't shift, her silence only deepening the mystery. If she was guilty of knowing the problem beforehand, why didn't she defend herself? And if she wasn't, why wouldn't she simply explain? Now the conflict had doubled. It was no longer just about whether her solution was correct. It was about her integrity, her credibility, and whether the academic world would ever accept her. The hall grew restless, caught between awe, suspicion, and the undeniable sense that something even bigger was about to erupt. The tension reached its breaking point. All eyes darted between the two professors, the one clutching the old papers, and the other still standing near the board. The first accused, the second hesitated, and the woman at the center of it all remained silent. Finally, The professor by the board slammed his chalk down and turned sharply. His voice rang out, shaking with both anger and awe. Enough. This is no imitation. I checked every line. Her method isn't just correct. It's original. It bypasses the very dead ends we've been trapped in for years. This isn't copied. It's genius. The hall erupted. Gasps, shouts, and stunned murmurs filled the space as the old papers were examined more closely. Yes, the problem had appeared before, but no one had ever solved it. The so-called reference only made her work more astonishing because she had done what generations of minds could not. Even the younger student in the back felt terror sting his eyes, realizing he had just witnessed something historic. But just as the wave of admiration began to rise, she finally spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, but carried a weight that silenced the room once more. "This isn't my first time solving it," she said softly. "I solved it years ago, but no one listened then." The crowd froze. That single sentence twisted the moment on its head. This wasn't just a victory, it was a revelation. She hadn't stumbled upon brilliance in a lucky flash. She had carried it with her all along, dismissed and ignored until today. The professors exchanged uneasy glances, their pride now pierced by the truth. The climax was undeniable. The impossible problem was solved, the conflict shattered, but the unexpected twist left everyone wondering how many other answers had the world overlooked simply because they came from someone it never expected. The hall remained in stunned silence after her words. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the reality began to sink in. This simple woman had carried the solution for years, unseen and unheard. The younger student in the back felt a rush of inspiration, realizing that brilliance isn't always tied to titles or recognition. Sometimes the answers come from the quietest voices, the ones no one expects to hear. The professors, once so sure of their authority, now faced an uncomfortable truth. Their pride had blinded them. Their assumptions had silenced someone who had solved what they could not. Some lowered their heads in shame. Others avoided her gaze entirely. Yet, in the midst of their discomfort, a sense of respect began to grow. Her calm composure, her refusal to boast or argue, made the moment even more powerful. The second professor, who had raised doubts, placed the old papers back down. His face softened with something close to regret. He didn't speak again. The first professor, still standing near the board, finally nodded toward her. "History will remember this," he said, his voice steady now. And for once, no one dared to argue. As she walked out of the hall, there were no grand celebrations, no applause. But the silence she left behind carried more weight than cheers ever could. People whispered not just about the impossible math problem that had been solved in 47 seconds, but about what her story revealed, that genius can come from anywhere, and that assumptions are often the greatest obstacles to truth. For the young student, it was life-changing. He realized that limits are illusions, and that courage to try, even when the world doubts you, can rewrite the impossible.